Two definitions for the House today. First, Article 9 of the Constitution. The aim is to achieve international peace based on justice and order. The Japanese people forever renounce war as a sovereign right of the nation and the threat or use of force as a means of settling international disputes. The right to bilinguality of the state is also not recognized. Land, sea, and air forces, as well as other war potential, will never be maintained. Second, remilitarization. This will include the addition of troops, which are not extensions of the JSDF, but instead its own separate entity, the Japanese military. Japan will have the right to use national funds on such a military, and measures can include conscription and purchasing offensive weapons from other countries. Now on to my policy, but before that, I would like to say that what we want is for Japan to have more leverage in the Asia-Pacific region, do not live in fear of an attack from North Korea, and with a better position to defend itself as a whole. And I would like to point out that this is an actor debate, so side op can only come up to us and tell us that when we alter Article 9, it is only detrimental to Japan and not to other countries. Now to my policy. Under our paradigm,
information, sir.
No, thank you, sir. Under our paradigm, Japan's military will be recognized as a legitimate entity by the country. Japan will be able to use offensive weapons such as ICBMs and tanks with the exception of weapons of mass destruction. The government can also pump in funds to the military and devote a portion of the country's GDP to the military. Article 9 will be altered in a way such that we recognize Japan's right to bilinguality when Japan's sovereignty is under threat from various countries. What this could potentially mean is if a missile hits Japan directly or Japan's sovereignty is under serious threat, Japan has the right to use force to fight back. Under our policy, what Japan can realistically do right now is assist its allies, organize military parades, demonstrations as a show of force. Yet, Japan still possesses the option to wage war. However, this does not mean that Japan will. We recognize that Japan is a rational country which will not wage war unless absolutely forced to. Not Japan won't become overnight the second North Korea. Hence, waging war in the near future simply isn't a likely option, and we tell you what remilitarization does in the round. The aim of our policy is for stability and peace for Japan, which runs parallel to the original Article 9. Yet, the method of demilitarization has become obsolete and no longer guarantees international peace. The constitution is outdated. It's 70 years old and times have changed. Now, if other countries gearing up, getting better resources, we don't see why Japan shouldn't have the right to remilitarize too. It's especially evident when surrounding countries have enormous military power and Japan is simply the outlier. The rationale behind our policy is that Japan is in serious need of a strong army. Japan needs an army so as to mobilize different groups in different places. This allows them to put, for example, position coast guards at the waters of Japan in different places to better detect potential threats and know if North Korea is testing weapons. A land force is so easier to train, so as to prepare for potential threats, and it's also easier to recruit new people into the military. Yes, the JSDF may consist of land, sea, and air defense, but it's inefficient and small as compared to a normal army. Even a side op argues that they are strong in numbers, but compared to military superpowers, they are insignificant. Now, for timeline for remilitarization. For the first 6 months, Japan will purchase small-scale weapons. By the next 5 months, Japan will have anti-aircraft weapons. After 3 years, Japan will have more aircraft carriers and more naval vessels. We expect Japan to be fully remilitarized after 5 years, and perhaps even become a serious military player in Asia Pacific. Now to my main substantive. What we want for Japan is for it to be more stable and safe and secure its own interests. A stakeholder in today's debate is China. Tensions between Japan and China can be traced back to not only their history in war, but also the conflicts in the Senkaku Islands, conflict over airspace, and the East China Sea. Article 9 simply restricts Japan's ability to respond to new threats such as international terrorism, increasingly assertive China, and nuclear-armed North Korea. It's in Japan's best interest to resolve these conflicts in their benefit. What this means is that they need more leverage in negotiations when dealing with China. China today can sit on Japan economically, militarily, and has enormous advantages over Japan. This does not work in Japan's favor, as it limits their power in terms of foreign policy. They cannot secure their interests with a weak military. A parallel can be drawn from history has proven time and time again that countries need to be protected from these sorts of threats. China is becoming increasingly aggressive when pushing its foreign policy abroad and asserting its dominance in the Asia-Pacific sphere. Side op might argue that China will engage in a full-blown war and be but when Xi Jinping has been so power-obsessed and has attempted to follow the footsteps of Mao, a strong deterrence against a potential attack is still useful. So how this will look like today is that China will view Japan as more of an equal. The reason why China can and has the ability to threaten Japan and its interest in such a way is because Japan has not enough power to counter it. Realistically, we understand that China won't change its foreign policy overnight, but we force China to rethink its approach because Japan becomes a military force to be reckoned with and a power in the Asia Pacific. China no longer becomes the only player in the long run. What China will likely do is perhaps against Japan, pursue a less aggressive policy. A negotiation table might become a more viable option instead of using military force against current Japan. China is not stupid. It simply does not do the same against the US as it does against Japan. Because US has an enormous military. China knows its own limitations and it's Japan's interest to push it. So what have I shown you today in my speech? I've shown you why Japan needs more leverage in the Asia Pacific region. I'll show you reasons why Japan should remilitarize and alter Article 9 of the Constitution. So please cite your side proposition.
I think the first block must be highlighted first one.
Japan should be kawaii and not attack Hawaii. We will tell you why. This debate is not about whether Japan should have a military, but what kind of military it should have. We support status quo, where Article 9 is defined by the Supreme Court as limiting the military to self and collective defense. This is supported by the international community too. This means, as they already mentioned, Japan can have fighter jets but not bombers, missile defense systems but not ICBMs. This is similar in principle to India imposing self-restraints through a first strike nuclear policy that prevented the antagonizing of regional aggressors such as Pakistan into nuclear Armageddon. We will show you that proposition's policy in an already volatile Northeast Asia, which still remembers Japan's World War II atrocities, harms regional peace, and Japan's national security. Proposition must defend Japan reclaiming the right of belligerent war, including the use of offensive weapons such as nuclear bombs. They've already failed on these grounds, and here is why. Their policy told us that, Japan has the option of warfare, but yet at the same time, their goal was to maintain international peace. Clearly, they do not recognize that a government, when creating a military that's capable of warfare, is actually not protecting international peace, but directly harming it, because now Japan has the legal and practical ability to wage wars against other countries. But they told us in their policy that, Japan can only launch an offensive attack when the sovereignty is infringed upon. That is our case. Clearly, they crossed the house because they agree with on our side of having a self-defense force, where it is our policy to protect Japan if Japan comes under threat. No, thank you, sir. Then they told us, they would not build weapons of mass destruction. This is clearly contradictory because they want to be strong. They want to be better than China and North Korea, which have nuclear weapons, but clearly they don't want to do this. So clearly they don't want to be strong. On their side, the Japanese military isn't going to be any stronger. They must tell us why they're going to build a strong military, but yet at the same time cut back on offensive weapons like mass destruction. So let's take down the strongest argument and take down the bulk of the case. They told us that there's a need to mobilize and defend Japan against threats. No, thank you, sir. We already do so on our side. We have a self-defense force, and we need to emphasize that Japan's self-defense force is already the 7th strongest military in the world. It is more than capable to protect itself. Then their first substantive, they told us that there is a need for the military might to act as a deterrent against China and North Korea. Now, China and North Korea are aggressive due to the fear of belligerent aggressors surrounding it, because they're concerned about regime survival. Japan, if it will not be a belligerent aggressor on our side, then simply China and North Korea would not be aggressive against it. But we give you a comparative. On their side, there's going to be an arms race, because China and North Korea now fear direct invasion by Japan. Before I move on, yes, sir.
You clearly do not understand how the world works like today. Military are used for bargaining trips. They are not actually going to be used for war. That's not practical, right?
Sir, if you're going to use your military as a bargaining chip, it means eventually you're going to use it for warfare if the bargaining chip doesn't go in your favor. Your side must defend Japan being a belligerent aggressor. Now to my case division, I'll argue that proposition causes a rise of militaristic influence in Japan and causing a Pacific arms race, while my second speaker will argue that proposition's policy compels Japan to support American belligerence. So now to my first substantive on the rise of militaristic influence in Japan. Japan has a strong and vocal right-wing movement consistently calling for Japan to assert its influence in the region. They reject Japan's culpability in the Second World War and push for more aggressive action. Proposition's policy will embolden and strengthen this movement, since it is seen as a success for the movement and a justification for their position. This is similar to how the right-wing lobby in the United States uses the Second Amendment as a justification for their aggressive use of firearms. The significance is that the right wing on their side is able to further militaristic agendas, encourage more provocative action, even waging wars to keep their neighbors in check, such as over territorial disputes with China, Russia, and the Koreas. This harms regional security as it introduces one new belligerent aggressor, Japan, into an already volatile region. Our policy focusing on self-defense prevents this. We ensure that Japan's identity remains peaceful and non-confrontational, similar to that of Iceland and Switzerland. We ensure that the bulk of Japan's society commits to the role of a peacekeeper and checks against the fury of the right wing. Now to my second substantive on causing a Pacific arms race. North Korea and China represent the largest national security threats for Japan. However, these two communist regimes are more interested in their own regime's survival than invading Japan, since they rule through fear and not democratic consent. They also recall brutal Japanese occupation in the early 20th century, including the rape of Nanking and Japan's colonization of Korea. Proposition's policy will alarm both nations, since Japan, their historically aggressive neighbor, will now be legally and practically able to attack them. Panic will then drive them to rapidly build up their military and further develop weapons of mass destruction. This arms race and brinksmanship between two nuclear powers, China and North Korea, will seriously harm regional security. The significance is the threat to Japan. Japan is well within the range of North Korean nukes and rapid invasion by the Chinese army. Either nation might want to make the first move and attack the Japanese. Even if this does not happen, it does not rule out that future regional conflicts, such as over claims in the South China Sea, will not erupt into full-blown warfare. Proposition must tell us why an arms race in an already volatile Northeast Asia is of any benefit. The best approach to calm these volatile regimes is on our side, when we assure them that Japan's weapons are only for self-defense and not for bombing Beijing and Pyongyang. For a safe Pacific, Japan must remain a pacifist we are proud to oppose.
Thank you for that speech on my second point.
A few points of contention for the hot take. However, I need to point out something. Side proposition doesn't really know what remilitarization is. They are making it seem it's a big deal. Many countries in the world already have an army. Told you we are not going to have weapons of mass destruction because we don't want that much instability in the region. This is just going to be remilitarization. Many countries have it. It's not a foreign thing. It is so normal for a country to have an army to defend itself against threats to its sovereignty. Furthermore, I would like to also point out Japan's self-defense force today is not enough. Sure, tell me what they have, but they don't really have any use. They don't have any use. Why? Because it's the structural things in Article 9 that prevent them from using these things effectively. If a country is posing a threat to sovereignty, it can't do anything, right? Now, moving on. I would also like to point out that a nuclear war won't happen because you won't have weapons of mass destruction. And military are only used for bargaining trips in today's war. You don't really see countries go to war that much often because military, these weapons are actually used to bargain, to have leverage over other countries, right? Next, they talked about how it's about North Korea's survival. Precisely it's about North Korea's survival. That's why when Japan remilitarizes, right, it will force them to change their approach towards Japan because they want to survive in this region. Next, now on my main point of contention, there won't be an arms race. This is not going to be a Second World War II. An army is so normal today. Don't tell me today, if Japan gets an army, there's going to be an arms race in the Asia Pacific. No, it's not going to be a Second World War II. Right? An arms race is not going to happen. We just want remilitarization because this policy is obsolete. It was made in World War II 70 years ago, and the world has changed so much from it for it. Next, side opposition has also not told us what their policy will do specifically. How will they safeguard against the threat of North Korea or safeguard against an aggressive China? They haven't told us that. But what we have told you in our first speaker's speech is how China will react to this, right? Now I'll talk to you how China will react to this more now, right? First of all, China, there won't be more tension in the region. Why? Because mostly this tension will come from China according to their side, right? But however, it's in China's best interest to maintain relationships with Japan because of the many economic interests they get from it, like the One Belt, One Road policy, right? Furthermore, remilitarization is also quite a normal thing in today's world. It's not, we are not going to get weapons of mass destruction. No, we are not going to get that. Next, what our policy does do is to change the inherent structural weakness in Article 9. The inherent structural weakness in Article 9 is that their self-defense is very limited. If, for example, if their sovereignty is to be threatened today, side opposition wouldn't know how to deal with it because their weapons are not enough. Sure, they already told us what they have, right? But is it enough in the context of North Korea and China? Is it enough? Is the weapon they currently possess enough to deal with North Korea? And we say no. Why? Because sure, Japan might have the 7th strongest army in the world, but in comparison to the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, they are simply insignificant. And that's what we are dealing with today. We are not dealing with the type of weapons they have. We are dealing with the type of weapons they have in comparison to the other countries. Now, I'm going to move on to my actual substantive material. First, I'm going to argue more about North Korea. And we are going to argue that stability can only be achieved through deterrence. And I'll tell you how we outside will deter against the potential threat of North Korea. Which side opposition haven't told us they're going to do. No, thank you, sir. Another key player in this debate would be North Korea. What North Korea is a country 1,200 kilometers away from Japan. It's a heavily armed country with ICBMs, nukes, tanks, etc. And the only thing North Korea realistically has is its army. That really doesn't have a real economy, right? And next, the only country that can realistically deter a North Korean threat is South Korea. However, they won't, because if they do decide to go aggressive against North Korea, right, they'll take the bulk of the damage. And that's not realistic. Hence, there needs to be another power in the Asia-Pacific sphere to stop North Korea. And US won't do anything. First of all, US have flip-flop on their stance whether they want to defend their allies or not. Secondly, US doesn't have the leverage they have in Asia-Pacific as compared to back home. Japan's safety is under threat, and I'll explain how it's bad. When North Korea flies a ballistic missile over Japan, it's really bad. Think about what the Hawaiians felt when a ballistic missile flew over them. They thought it would end up the world. And Japan is this close to North Korea. Imagine how they feel living under constant threat of North Korean attack, right? Even if it doesn't hit, and we realize not hitting is a very viable possibility. North Korea won't launch a direct attack on Japan. However, even if they don't, even if it doesn't directly land, there's some very serious implications. What this means is that people live in fear, live in constant fear of being attacked every single day of their life. They live under constant threat, and Japan as a whole will suffer. You can look to this as a form of psychological warfare, right? And it's not limited to physical damage. Every day Japan is under threat. The climate of fear may stagnate their economy, and economic investors in the long run will simply chase away. And perhaps in the next 30 years, right? No, thank you, sir. They might stop being a superpower, an economic powerhouse in Asia Pacific. But in the bigger picture, the climate of fear in the long term, people lose faith in the government. People distrust their government. People can't even feel safe in their own home, and this will damage the stability of Japan. How will it look like realistically? Within the next 30 years, there might be instability, their political climate might change for the worse, and that's what side opposition doesn't want, right? They don't want the political climate to change for the worse, and that's what will happen on their side. We realize that altering Article 9 isn't going to change overnight. North Korea isn't going to change their policy overnight. However, what they will do is when two countries, both South Korea and Japan, combined, can rival their military, they will change their approach in Asia Pacific. Why? Because the military is the only thing it has. When it is rival, then they will change their policy approach towards the countries within Asia Pacific sphere. And even if they argue that, sure, North Korea will still fly ballistic missiles over Japan, even though our policy is negative, right? We tell you what we get. You'll still get peace of mind, because the Japanese people will know that in a case of North Korean attack, they will still be defended, and the side opposition cannot guarantee that today. Even if they argue that US and South Korea will defend Japan in the case of attack, the sheer power of North Korea is already enough for Japan to remilitarize, right? And furthermore, I would like to also point out that side opposition is against some sort of right-wing movement. They are against political opposition, and they are blowing up the impact of political opposition, and that's not what we want in a democratic society, right? We don't want some right-wing movement, but we feel that that's irrelevant to the debate, because we realize that political opposition is not such a big deal in today's world, and what we want in total, and the bigger picture is how it affects the Asia-Pacific sphere, and not Japan internally, with this side proposition.
Right, thanks for coming to us. You guys ready? Right, let's get on.
two contentions for the House today. First, on the principal usage of the Army of Japan, and second, on the practical implications of an Army of Japan. So on to the first point of contention, on the principal usage. So here's where we push proposition, because their stance isn't just a defensive army that is not belligerent. It's not just an army, it's an army with the express intention of becoming a belligerent aggressor and becoming an aggressor once again. And I'm going to use proposition's logic here, because in the substantive, they told us they want Japan to have leverage over other countries. So in order to have leverage over other countries, you have to be powerful, you have to be aggressive in the region. So proposition cannot simply stop short at a cowardly stance saying that Japan won't become belligerent or aggressive. They have to if they want their substantive to work. And then they told us that they don't want weapons of mass destruction because that's unstable. Firstly, they concede that because of the military build-up, there will be instability in the region. Because Japan, by their logic, has to become aggressive and powerful in order to assert leverage over other countries. So their stance is technically contradictory because they refuse to build up intercontinental ballistic missiles or mass destruction weapons. But second, they concede that they don't really want to be equal with North Korea and China. Why? Because if they're not going to build aggressive weapons, if they're not going to build weapons that can rival the capabilities of North Korea and China, which is, no thank you sir, essentially nuclear weapons, then they're never ever going to be able to frighten China or North Korea, who has the ability to blow the entire city of Tokyo to bits on their side. And second, they told, so moving on, and they also want to tell us about how military is an essential part of the nation. So here's the line, this is the line that we heard in the second speaker. They told us how militaries are commonplace in the world today, and therefore it is not contradictory or not unusual to have a military. First response, we tell you that no. Iceland, for example, among other countries and examples, has no military and is not an essential part of their nationhood, and yet they're so able to progress economically and socially without the presence of a military. But second response, we told you, no thank you sir, even if it's commonplace for military in the status quo today, why is it so different for Japan specifically to have a military? And here's where I move on to my second point of contention on the practical implications of the army. And so here's where, no thank you sir, I discussed the main pillar of proposition's case. Because the only logic line they gave us was that the military will function as a deterrence, a form of leverage over other countries. That's the only potential benefit that is coming out from their policy. So let's just tell you whether or not the military is aggressive, China and North Korea will still perceive it as aggressive and what the implications are of this. So they told us that the military of Japan will be used to gain leverage over other countries. First response, unfortunately, proposition fails to understand how geopolitical tensions works in the real world today. An increasing military no longer scales in deterrence. At some point in its expansion, Japan will see diminishing returns of deterrence for which it increases their army. That's why we see so many security dilemmas, no thank you sir, happening all over the world, in Eastern Europe, in Southeast Asia, in the Middle East. In case proposition cannot comprehend what a security dilemma is, let's just explain it. Japan thinks that a greater military will provide a more secure region. But then, the Japanese military strengthens, inviting China to become more fearful, and in return, China will therefore strengthen its military, no thank you sir, to a point that is highly significantly better than the Japanese military. Ironically, Japan now ends up with a much stronger China than before on proposition side, a much more dangerous region, and therefore they're no longer in any capacity to reach leverage over China when China will retaliate and increase its own military. Second response, and here's where we tied it into actual real-world context, right? Because my first speaker told you how China is more than incentivized to provoke Japan. 4 structural reasons. 1, because of a historical lens. China is inclined to view Japan in a historical lens. Please, they've been invaded by Japanese forces throughout their entire history, the Sino-Japanese War, in World War II, for example. All these examples are factored into the calculations of China. So even if proposition asserts that the military of Japan won't be aggressive, China will still perceive it as so, because they've been invaded so many times. So the response there is provoked in China will be a strengthening of the Chinese military anyway, regardless of the state of military in Japan. Second, a current lack of apology from China. And here's where my first speaker proved to you how there are many examples, for example, of how Japan refuses to apologize officially, no thank you sir, over the rape of Nanking or the massacre of Chinese people during World War II. How they continuously visit the Yasukuni Shrine, for example. And all these are antagonizing China to be aggressive towards Japan. Third, economic competition. And here's where proposition wanted to assert and told us that China has an incentive to remain friendly with China because of the Belt Road Initiative. Now let's just enlighten proposition. Because the Belt Road Initiative works completely opposite of Japan. Think about it. The Belt Road Initiative is extending westwards towards Turkey, Russia, Afghanistan, Europe. Japan is on the completely other side because, well, China has no incentive to economically cooperate with these people. So moving on to my last substantive then, on why Japan will have to support American belligerence on proposition. The US is known for regularly conducting military interventions. Throughout the last century alone, the US has intervened in Korea, Vietnam, Haiti, Iraq, Afghanistan, etc. When America goes on rampages, it usually compels its allies to commit their troops to this mission. During the Vietnam War, for example, the already war-weary South Korea had to provide troops or risk American retaliation and abandonment. Japan has been spared this particular fate precisely because of Article 9. Its limitations and the ensuing lack of offensive power leaves Japan unable to contribute to American suicide missions and retaliation. The significance of this is simple. Proposition's policy will see Japan having no choice now but to contribute to America's war efforts because of the increased capabilities and offensive nature of the Japanese military on their side. These will lead to Japanese soldiers dying for a war which is not even in Japan's interest, which ironically brings Japan back to the warmongering times that they experienced in the past. Because our side, for a safe Pacific, Japan must remain a pacifist. I'm so proud to oppose.
Right, next turn on my better prop.
This debate has brought down to three main questions, but before I go on to those questions, I'd like to clear up a couple of things. First things first, side opposition came out in their second speaker and decided to tell us that to have this political leverage, we need to be offensive, we need to be powerful. We agree that we need to be powerful, but we do not agree that we need to be offensive. Why is this so? We believe that if you have a sword at your side, people are more likely to be wary around you, that they will not be acting so recklessly in front of you. We see that just by having the option to wage war, that you have the military to wage war, that these people, these countries will be less likely to try and say, because that we have our army, therefore you guys need to stop. You guys need to lay down and you guys need to be pressured by us. We don't see that as true. We see that in statement on side opposition, we see that they are trying to down the political stability in their country, that they themselves will be allowed to be pressured by other countries. Onto the second clear up, which was that they started talking about how Iceland didn't need a military. But we just like to say that on side opposition, they also don't understand the security environment of Japan. Because the thing is that Japan has a lot of tension in the region already. We understand that North Korea, China, whatever. We know that there's a lot of tension, therefore that is the main reason why we need a military. We need it for deterrence. Side opposition has clearly sidestepped that whole narrative because there is a lot of tension in Asia Pacific. Therefore, we need to remilitarize. They haven't covered that read, so we expect third opposition to actually come and talk about it. Okay, now onto my three questions. First, the JSDF vs the army. Second, North Korea, and third, how will Japan react? Okay, so first, the JSDF vs the army. So I was splitting to a couple points. First, the bargaining chips. So on our side, we already told you about how because you have the army, when you remilitarize, you are better able to say, because I have an army, you'll be less like you cannot pressure me to do these kind of things, because we understand that the government of every country works like this, that they're trying to get the most benefits for their country. So the thing is that if China were, for example, to wage war on Japan, China will still have some losses that will be accrued on their side. However, on side opposition, all they're just trying to say is that, okay, we don't have a bargaining chip, so number one, we can just concede to whatever you have, because that you can wage war on us. That's number one. Number two, if you wage war on us, we are doomed. Because that you only can defend your country, and you cannot do anything else except for defending your country. So therefore, they're just trying to say that they are okay with actually getting Japan stepped over because of the pressurizing from other countries. We see that that's completely abhorrent, and therefore that we win that point of JSDF vs army. Second thing, security. So here's where we found it a bit weird, because the side opposition didn't really give us a policy. All they said was that we are okay with status quo, blah blah JSDF. But we see that while that technically has security, that North Korea and China will not be so-called spurred on to attack it, we see that because that as of now, North Korea is already being very offensive against Japan, and this doesn't help Japan in any way, even if they don't remilitarize. Because the thing is that when you don't remilitarize, North Korea can think that it is okay for them to just keep being offensive against Japan. We see this detrimental to Japan because then now you let them be more offensive against you, and sooner or later they will start attacking you. And therefore, side opposition isn't trying to benefit Japan; he's trying to destroy it. Now to my last point about belligerency. Okay, so they said that that Japan will just keep attacking, that they become aggressive. We already told you why this is not true, but let me just give you another point of analysis. We already told you why in my first speaker that Japan isn't a second North Korea. Here's why. Because the thing is that Japan already has a huge loss either from the bombing in Hiroshima. But the thing is that because they know that their power is already a lot lower as compared to the other superpowers, therefore they wouldn't be very incentivized to actually attack. Second thing, it is not a sudden up in military strength. That they're not going to, in like 1 month, they're going to like fully militarize that they have 500 tanks or something like that. We see that, we already told you in our first speaker that the process will be gradual, that these people will slowly increase their military powers such that these other countries won't be able to see Japan as a very, very imminent threat. Okay, now to my second clash about North Korea. Okay, so from what we heard from opposition, as I said, they just keep talking about how they will just be more aggressive against us on our side. We tell them that's completely untrue. We also need to say that when Japan doesn't remilitarize against North Korea, what happens is that North Korea can become more aggressive, not just to Japan. If we're going to take it on the macro scale, while it also becomes more aggressive against Japan, it also does the same thing with other countries. While while the main person that we need to talk about is Japan, we see that by saying that we help the other countries as well, we also get some more political leverage by saying that because we helped you to contain this threat, you guys can also, you guys need to be less aggressive against that. We see this is beneficial for Japan because now it has more political leverage. We really told you in our previous speakers about how we want political leverage, want stability, and want economic growth. We see that when we, as Japan, we shall not stand for a country where we have to live in fear every day of an imminent North Korean missile flying over, or having the threat of, because it is very, very near, North Korea is very near, they come and attack us at any time. So with all that I said, I proved to you why Japan needs a military, because it provides stability, it provides economic growth, and how opposition on their case, they didn't really prove anything except for, well, we will get this false security that they're trying to push forward. So with all that I said, please side opposition.
Right, and then done with the back of
Today we saw a very highly concessionary stance from side proposition. They wanted offensive weapons, but told the world that they were never going to use them. They wanted to be the equal of China and North Korea, but yet they were unwilling to build up any weapons of mass destruction. Clearly they're having their cake and eating it, because they're essentially not going to do anything with the amendment once they actually alter Article 9. Basically, proposition cannot stand for this, because what they have to stand for is specifically altering Article 9. Let me draw your attention to what first proposition himself brought up. That Article 9 states that you renounce the right to belligerency. What they are doing by altering it is saying that we want the right to be belligerent again. We want the ability to wage war again. We want the ability to invade other nations again. This is what proposition have to stand for. The fact that they were unwilling to stand for this shows they already lose the debate. But even if they do take this concessionary stance, opposition still wins, because our harms were associated not with the actual build-up of the military, but the perception of the build-up of the military. We told you about the harms articulated in all of our three substantives were associated with people thinking about the Japanese military, not the eventual build-up. So that they actually have still, their concessionary stance still doesn't address the harms we brought about in our third substantive. But how does this address their case? Because they don't actually have leverage or deterrent or this so-called bargaining chip. Because if they're unwilling to use it and they tell the world that we're actually never going to use this, then I will suggest that their leverage and deterrent doesn't work in the first place. Since it only works if you're going to use it. This is what we told you from first. We got no response from them. So their so-called leverage, which is the main pillar of their case, already is taken down. 2 points of attention. Security of Japan, and secondly on regional tension. So firstly on the security of Japan. First of all, is there a problem for proposition to solve? No, because they were never very specific on what exactly was lacking in the JSDF, right? They said that, oh, the JSDF is inefficient, is weak. Yes, it's the strongest military in the world, but it can't compare with 1, 2, 3. I mean, like, this is not very, very specific, but what are the exact deficiencies? So they tell us about Coast Guards and stuff like that. We tell you that this is already present in the JSDF. Until third, they never exactly articulated what was it that was wrong with the JSDF. We think that the Japanese Defense Force is more than sufficient to deal with all the threats that they talk about. We think that this is something that proposition never wanted to deal with, the fact that the Japanese Defense Force was more than sufficient and that we didn't need their policy. In fact, in first they told us that their policy was only when sovereignty is infringed, then Japan can defend themselves. Guys, this is our policy, this is status quo, this is actually not changing anything. So clearly, in terms of the threat from North Korea and China, this threat doesn't exist because we already have a sufficient defense force. What was another threat that they said in first, but left it alone down the line? They told us about responding to terrorism. I would suggest that terrorism is actually worse on their side, because we told you in our third substantive about how Britain faced retaliation from terrorists after being forced to support American belligerents, something that was conveniently ignored by proposition. So I would suggest, hold on one sir, on the issue of terrorism alone, I think that Japan is far more likely to face terrorist activity on their side than ours. We clearly win on this. Yes, sir.
Since you're the last speaker, please address these issues your first two speakers haven't responded to. First, the climate of fear, and secondly, how Japan's economy will suffer under concerned North Korea threats, something your first two speakers haven't dealt with.
Okay, so first of all, sir, on the climate of fear, my second speaker told you about how a climate of fear doesn't exist since the threat is already taken care of with our defense force. But I'm going to extend on this. I think that the climate of fear isn't actually something that they solve, because the correct solution to a threat is not to build up offensive capability, but rather to strengthen your self-defense. This is something that's consistent with the status quo interpretation of Article 9. So if we really wanted to build up more defense, something that we're fine with, we think that we don't actually need proposition's policy. Something they haven't told us in all three speakers is why we need their policy. Why specifically offensive weapons? Why specifically the right to belligerence is something they haven't told us. We told you in second about how it was a bit strange to improve defense by building up offensive weapons. We heard no response from third speaker. So clearly, on the security of Japan, first of all, there is no problem, and second of all, our side solves the problem far better. We don't need proposition's policy. Second point of contention on regional tensions. They told us that we need leverage over China. We told you in first about how the reason for Chinese and North Korean aggression was the fear of belligerent aggressors surrounding them. About how if Japan continues to renounce the right to belligerency, then China and North Korea won't be aggressive. We heard no response. Let me extend on this. Korea and China's only memory is of rape and pillage by Japanese who bayoneted children, and now when propositions say we need these same bayonets again, I would suggest that China and North Korea are going to become even more aggressive on their side. They are the ones who provoke an arms race. Further extension, in status quo, China uses the presence of the US military in the region to justify building settlements in the South China Sea, such as the annexation of the Spratly Islands, for example. If Japan removes Article 9 on their side, China is likely to do this even more because they'll use the so-called threat of Japan as an excuse to gobble up more of the South China Sea and therefore become even more aggressive. So on our very worst case, we think that proposition still is worse. So then we told you about emboldening right-wing embodying right-wing militaristic sentiments, and they brush it off by saying it's a domestic issue, we shouldn't care about this. First of all, that's just wrong, right? Domestic issues are still important to Japan. But how does this play out in the region? I think when Japan goes back to the militaristic culture that was leading up to the Second World War, right? We think that this is when China and North Korea or even other countries in the region are going to get more and more scared, because this is a kind of, we need an empire, we need to invade other countries, we need the right to belligerence. This is the kind of thing that exactly happened before the Second World War. We think this is going to make regional tensions even worse, to things like the security dilemma, which my first speaker already told you about. So we think in terms of regional tensions, our side is the one who makes things better, because we think the correct solution is to appease North Korea and China and build up more defense rather than offensive weapons. Opposition show you down the line that not only do we not need propositions policy, that it absolutely makes things worse, not only in the region but within Japan. I am so proud to oppose.
Third opposition for the speech, there's a 2-minute break, right? Seats. I invite the opposition
Two reasons why opposition won today's debate. One, opposition stuck more closely to the true spirit of the motion. We heard opposition taking on the rightful burden of proving that the attacking capabilities of the Japanese military increases more harms on Japan. Proposition, however, sneakily squirreled from the motion. They refused to prove the safety and feasibility of remilitarization, yet wanted to enjoy all the benefits of a belligerent, warmongering military. And here's where we examine the first clash of today's debate on the usage of the Japanese military. Proposition was highly schizophrenic. When articulating their substantives, they adopted the narrative that the Japanese military will be strong, hyper-aggressive in order to assert leverage and deterrence over other countries. And yet in their rebuttals, they adopted the narrative that the Japanese military won't be aggressive, they'll be peaceful, war won't break out, and nuclear war won't escalate in the East Asian region. And here's where opposition was more consistent on this clash, because they told you that the Japanese military, whether it's because of Japanese nationalism or simply using proposition's logic, the need to apply leverage on other countries, the military will end up being hyper-aggressive, and therefore they took this clash because they proved that more conclusively why the military will be aggressive. But moving on to the second reason why opposition won today's debate. Opposition showed much greater appreciation of the real world. And here's where we examine the second clash, or the message sent by the Japanese military. And here, opposition edged ahead significantly, because they were able to resolve the deadlock in the first clash on what exactly the Japanese military will be used for. Opposition proved to us that regardless of the use or the nature of the Japanese military that is developed on proposition, China and North Korea will still perceive it as an offensive, hyper-aggressive, belligerent force. And opposition gave you systemic reasons as to why China and North Korea will have such a reaction. We talked about the historical lens, about how China has been invaded by Japan. We talked about how military aggression in itself already causes other countries to escalate their own forces in a security dilemma. They told you how China has no economic incentive to side with Japan. We give you multiple reasons as to why China and North Korea will perceive it in a negative light. And we moved on further to explicitly show you why there are explicit harms of proposition's policy when China and North Korea perceives it as such. And here's where we told you how China and North Korea can retaliate against Japan the moment such harms are incurred. And because they provided us a harmful alternative and never really solved the problem in status quo, because they never allowed they allowed for China and North Korea to attack Japan and harm the citizens even more. And it's because on our side, when the Japanese citizens and the Japanese people are much more protected by the use of a peaceful force in the Pacific, I'm so proud to oppose.
I think I'll reply like after.
Now I'm going to analyze what both sides said. However, I would like to say something first. Side opposition has never really told us what their policy will do. They'll say they'll maintain status quo and some magical benefit will come out. If this magical benefit will come out, when will it come out? It hasn't come out yet. North Korea is still aggressive, China is still pursuing an aggressive foreign policy, and status quo simply doesn't work today. And they haven't told us how these benefits will come about just because you keep current status quo. Now they also talked about the example of Iceland, but Iceland is so much different from Japan, and that's the only realistic example they have brought up, right? And what we are trying to do, we are having the ability to wage war, the option to wage war. We're not going to be a warmongering nation or a hyper-aggressive nation. What we told you, if you want a regular military, it's not that hard to understand, right? And if they would like to keep harping on about history, let me tell you this. I have personally told you that this policy obsolete is over 70 years old, and if you like harp on the history, move on already, right? Now, I'll move on to analyzing both sides' cases. What we told you today is how the GSDF was not enough in comparison to the world superpowers. We are not telling you that it's not a strong military. It's just not strong enough to deter many other countries, such as China or North Korea. So we are just upping their military capability. They haven't told us what exactly they will do. What we want is leverage against China, first of all. Secondly, we will tell you why China won't suddenly turn hyper-aggressive. First of all, China has interest in Japan, so no, they won't suddenly turn hyper-aggressive. Secondly, it's just a relative, it's just a military, right? It's just regular military. It's not going to become the second North Korea. So, hence, China is not going to suddenly feel very threatened by it and launch a hyper-aggressive policy against Japan, right? Next, they haven't really dealt on our sides substantive on about how Japan's economy will suffer if they're under the constant threat of North Korea. And furthermore, they haven't talked about the climate of fear. They simply brush it off saying, no, the climate of fear won't happen because by appeasing China and North Korea suddenly become less aggressive. But no, that hasn't happened now, right? Japan has not militarized, and North Korea is not going to turn less aggressive anytime soon in the near future. Next, I now want to talk more about what their side has done. Their side has simply said all about status quo, and they haven't offered a clear policy. What they've been doing instead, if they're bringing up non-existent detriments on our side and haven't really pushed the space more. So I'll tell you what they have said so far. They talked about how North Korea needs to survive, hence they won't go hyper-aggressive on Japan, but we really can't guarantee that, right? North Korea has a very unstable dictatorship, and they are their own country on their own, besides a little economic backing from China, right? So North Korea can turn aggressive when the situations turn dire. Secondly, about the right-wing movement in Japan, we already told you this internal political opposition. We don't see what's wrong with internal political opposition, and they haven't told us why political opposition from the right wing is that bad. Anyways, next, they also talked about, I'm going to do some comparison. We attempted to solve the issues that are facing Japan right now. They haven't told us how they will deter the North Korean threat. They haven't told us how they deter China's aggression, because they simply just told us North Korea suddenly become less aggressive if Japan doesn't remilitarize, right? But that's not true, because if you look at the world today, side opposition is living in the past. North Korea has clearly not become less aggressive because Japan has demilitarized in the past 70 years. Please satisfy proposition.
Alright, I think both sides, just applause, shake hands, leave the room, we'll call you back.